All right, number 20. According to the law of diminishing marginal utility, which of the following is true? Now remember, diminishing marginal utility is the law that tells us that the first cookie is good, the 10th cookie is less good than the first one, and the 100th cookie, really, we're not really too interested in the 100th cookie. It brings us very little additional enjoyment. So let's take a look at the choices. Total satisfaction decreases as more units of a good are consumed. Now, it's easy to say that this one is right, because you get to the 100th one, your satisfaction decreases, but it's the satisfaction of just that 100th additional cookie. Your total satisfaction doesn't just go to zero because somebody gave you the 100th cookie. Now, in fact, it still increases, but it increases very slowly. So because this is the total satisfaction, this would not be the correct choice for diminishing marginal utility. Okay, B. The additional satisfaction received from consuming an extra units of good decreases as the consumption of goods increases. And that is absolutely the correct definition of diminishing marginal utility. Okay, let's just look at the other choices to make sure. The additional satisfaction received from consuming extra units of a good decreases as consumption of the goods decrease. So that's stated backwards. It says the goods increase, not decrease, so that is incorrect. The additional satisfaction received from consuming extra units of a goods increases as the consumption of the goods increases. Again, that is not true. When the marginal utility is decreasing, total utility is decreasing. And we kind of alluded to that in the first part. When the marginal utility is decreasing, total utility is not necessarily decreasing. It could still be increasing. In fact, it will be increasing. So when you get that 100th cookie, your total utility is still increasing, but it's not increasing as fast. So that one would be incorrect. Okay, number 21. Within the range of market demand, which of the following is consistent with the conditions of a natural monopoly? So they put natural in there because there's something that makes something a natural monopoly, and that would be very high fixed costs to get started, but as you keep adding customers, the cost of adding each additional customer becomes less and less and less. So the cost curve, the marginal cost curve is decreasing. And that would be the case. So you can imagine if you have this high cost to get in, and then each customer you add becomes less and less, how would somebody compete with that? So let's just say you have a big monopoly, like the phone company, and then you want to go ahead and compete with it. So they already have thousands or millions of customers, and they could add another customer for next to nothing because their marginal cost is so low, but yet the competitor to come in has a huge fixed cost to overcome, and his cost of adding one additional customer is very, very high at the beginning. It starts to go down, but it's still very high. It's so high that they can't compete with the person who's in there in the first place, and that's what makes it a natural monopoly. Okay, so let's look at the choices. All right, so long run total cost decreases, output increases. So this is a trick that we saw before. We see that they are talking about total cost. Could total cost ever decrease as output increases? They don't. What they're trying to do is fool you by using the rest of this that, we know there's going to be some decrease as the output increases, but it's not the total cost that's going to decrease. It's going to be the marginal cost. So that's in there to throw you off, and it would not be correct. Second choice, long run average total cost remains constant as the output increases. So we said that's not part of a natural monopoly. We'd expect these average total cost to go down as you add more and more customers. The average total cost is the fixed plus the variable. The variable's going down, and as you make more and more, your average fixed costs go down. So you certainly wouldn't expect it to stay constant. You'd expect it to go down. Long run average total cost decreases as output increases, and that is exactly the condition for a natural monopoly. Let's look at the other choices. Marginal cost exceeds average cost. That's not necessarily the case with a natural monopoly. In fact, we'd expect it to be otherwise. We'd expect the marginal cost to always be less than the average cost, because the cost of adding one additional customer is just your variable cost, whereas the total average cost includes the fixed cost. So we'd expect the opposite of that to be true. And finally, setting price equal to marginal cost will maximize profits. And again, profits are always maximized when the marginal revenue equals the marginal cost. All right, so that too would not be the answer. All right, let's look at number 22. A farmer grows wheat using two inputs, labor and land, whose prices are constant. If she doubles her inputs, she finds that the total quantity of wheat produced more than doubles. Therefore, it must be true that in this output range, a long-run average total cost curve is. All right, so we know that before anything happens, she has an average total cost curve, which is the total cost divided by the quantity. So she finds out that she doubled her inputs, so the total cost went to twice of what it was, and her output more than doubled. So I'll just put in, 3Q. So we see that here we just have TC over Q, and then afterwards we got the average total cost 2/3 of the TC over Q. So here it was a 1 multiplier, and here it's 2/3. So 1 is greater than 2/3. So that means that the average total cost is decreasing. Alright, so let's take a look at the choices. Upward sloping would mean that the average total cost increased. Downward sloping means that the average total cost curve is decreasing, and that is correct. And if it's downward sloping, it cannot be horizontal, it cannot be vertical, and it could be U-shaped, but we don't know that. We just know that it's downward sloping in this output range. If it's U-shaped, it would be outside of the range, because we don't know about that, so that can't be the answer either. Okay, number 23. A constant cost, we've seen that before, so we know what to do in this problem. Perfectly competitive gadget industry is in long-run equilibrium. An increase in the number of consumers of a gadget will most likely result in. Okay, so we have the typical demand curve, and we have the typical supply curve, and we see that this is the amount of equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. Now I drew this gray line across because we know that this is a constant cost industry. Constant cost industry means the price will never change in the long run. Alright, so we see that there's more customers for the gadget. So when we see more customers for the gadget, we have this red line now, which means that the demand for the gadget has increased. So in the short term, remember, you can't change the quantity very quickly in the short term. So what's going to happen is, since the demand went up, we're going to now have a increase in the price to the point where the quantity that is available intersects the new demand curve. And then over time, what's going to happen is the price is going to slide down the demand curve, but not to where the supply curve is. Because this is a constant cost industry, it's going to come all the way down to the long-term price, which will never change in a constant cost industry, which implies that the supply curve is going to change. Alright, so if we go through this again step by step, we start out right here at equilibrium. Then we have a demand shock. The demand increases, demand curve goes to the right, so the price jumps all the way up to the demand curve. But then over time, and that's only short term, in the long run, the price is going to make its way back down to the constant cost price. And you see it went down there because the supply curve moved to the right. More suppliers came into the industry and started to make the product, which resulted in the price being the same. Okay, so let's take a look at our choices. A higher short run and long run prices for the gadget. Well, we know that that is not true because in the long run the price returns to the equilibrium, the original equilibrium price. Reduced short-run profits followed by the exit of some firms. Well, we don't see any of that happening, so that would not be correct. An upward shift in all short-run cost curves followed by a higher long-run price for gadgets. Again, the long-run price always returns back to the original equilibrium price in a constant cost industry, so again, that is not true. Higher short-run prices for the gadgets followed by an increase in the quantity produced. And we see that is exactly what happened, that we had a short-run price and then the quantity increased. And we'll check the last one just to be sure. a decrease in the demand for gadgets followed by a decrease in the supply of gadgets, which is just the opposite of what happened because we have uh, an increase in the number of consumers for the gadgets, so that is incorrect.